So, good evening and welcome to the Board of Education Committee of the Whole meeting on Wednesday, May 7th at 5:30 p.m. We are calling the meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. Can we please call the roll?
Dr. Henry? Mrs. Assif?
Here.
Mrs. Hostler?
Here.
Mrs. Slawinski? Mr. Bresnahan? Mrs. Troutman? Mrs. Arvanites?
Here. I'm glad we have a quorum, but I will tell you, Dr. Henry will be walking in any minute, and Mrs. Slawinski will also be joining us. She was commuting from the city, and the train just had some stops. So she will also be here. Her train left late. If we can't, we have 4 currently board members present and 3 absent with 2 on their way in. At this time, can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pretty sure our first item on the agenda is me turning this over to Dr. Campbell to kick us off on our Committee of the Whole work this evening. And a special thank you to the principals who are joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much, Board President Arvanites. Tonight is our 3rd and final Committee of the Whole meeting for the 24-25 school year. If we go to the next slide, the Committee of the Whole meeting, in addition to other spaces within our regularly scheduled board meeting, is an opportunity to monitor progress in alignment to our strategic plan. Tonight's Committee of the Whole meeting is no different. We are going to be delving deeply into our strategic plan alignment and really hearing directly from the voices of our school leaders, which we are so excited to have here tonight. Dr. Hurt, principal of York Community High School. We have Ms. DeCipio, principal of Bryan Middle School, and we have Ms. Sweeney, principal of Jefferson Elementary. So once again, can we just give our principals a round of applause for being here tonight? They are definitely standing in the gap and representing across. We are a unit district, so we have someone to represent the work that's happening in EC5 as well as middle school, and we know here all roads lead to York High School. And they're going to be sharing some really, really exciting work that has been taking place throughout this entire school year. So I'm going to start off by just kind of, again, grounding us in our strategic work. And then I'm going to kick it over to our illustrious Assistant Superintendent of School Leadership, Ms. Leischel, who is going to share some exciting work we have been engaged in. Then our building leaders are going to share the work that they've been engaged in with their teams that really drives and impacts school improvement. And then we will end with the opportunity for board members after each of our school leaders present. We'll have a moment for board members to ask some questions, which we definitely have prompts for you to lead out those questions as we engage further in the work. Within our strategic plan, we know that we have and we're grounded in our priority areas, being that of student success, learning environment, financial and operational effectiveness, and community outreach and engagement. Today's conversation is going to really ground ourselves in that student success and that learning environment. The strategic plan, which the board members, you have seen this graphic and was very, very vocal, and I really appreciate our board saying that we know there are strategic plans that are developed and then they don't live, and they are not considered a key lever of and continuous improvement. We're really excited to say here in D205, our strategic plan is definitely a living and thriving document and a plan that guides the work that we are doing in our continuous improvement efforts. Our strategic plan has allowed for us to have very greater clarity in the critical levers that is going to continue to guide that work. As shared with the Board of Education, when you look down to that alignment and see the department goals, as shared previously, each department has what we call a strategic one-pager. That strategic one-pager outlines the strategies and the goals for that particular year aligned with our overall district goals that is driven out of the strategic plan, the board, as well as the superintendent's work. I want to call your attention to that triangle, and you're going to see it even larger on the next screen, so you don't have to read it. But in our student success, we have really used research to continue to drive our attention to that triangle. And one of the critical levers and drivers of student success has been to develop leader capacity, to support the adoption of high quality curricular materials and to ensure that we have high quality curricular embedded professional learning to drive our student success, as well as using research-based tools around our learning environment and around the things that we know are critical to support overall our student success. As a reminder on the next slide, this is how each year we've shared with the board in previous sessions how we've identified those priority objectives that will drive the work for that current year. And then our principal leaders use those priority objectives to align their school improvement efforts and their school improvement work. We know, and I'm going to share on our next slide, don't go there yet, we know that research tells us that the principal leader role is critical to student success and student outcomes. It's actually only second to high quality instruction that happens in the classroom. So we believe that the principal leader sets the conditions and the orientation and the education lingo, the organizational capacity for quality instruction and support, social, emotional, and academic support to take place. And so the principal leader has been a critical lever for the district office in order to bridge the gap between our district-wide priorities and how those priorities are working and living in the very unique school-specific context. On the next slide, there is a quote that I'm going to just pause that reiterates what I just shared. And so here in District 205, we're so appreciative of the Board of Education, the district office leaders, understanding the critical role that our principal leaders play and how you have supported this work over the course of the last several years in our adoption of the strategic plan. So when we talk about the role of the principal leader, it has evolved. It has evolved over several years, even since we have been in schools as a student. There has been talk previously about the principal being a great manager, making sure operationally things are rolling, the buses are coming in on time, the lunch schedules are set. And then, if you recall, there were several years ago where there was a shift into saying that's not enough. When we started looking at student outcomes and student achievement, that's where the research led us to delve a little bit deeper in saying, well, the role of the principal leader is a little bit more sophisticated than just management. And that's when there was a birth of the principal as the instructional leader. Well, that work has even evolved more into saying, listen, it is actually about not just the principal providing the direct feedback to teachers, but it's about the principal creating the conditions and being the organizational leader to make sure that all of our systems and all of our structures and all of our practices and processes are put in place to support the totality of our school. And so when I share with you, if you go to the next slide, that triangle actually exemplifies and highlights that principal as the organizational leader for instructional improvement. So it's how the principal creates the leaders, the levers of utilizing these critical pieces collaboratively, intentionally, and in alignment to really, the research has shown us, really results in having the highest impact. So we do here operate within a theory of action. So we have been extremely supportive and very intentional in how we come alongside our principals. And the Board of Education has been so supportive in this journey for those that have been with us. And so district office, the way in which we work and the support that we're giving to principals is very much aligned to ensuring that they are able to most effectively build that system within their school that's going to have the greatest impact on student success. With that being said, I am going to pass the mic to my colleague that's going to share a little bit more about what framework we have been using in order to do that intentional work. Ms. Leischel?
Great, thank you, Dr. Campbell. Hello, everyone, it's good to be here. As Dr. Campbell highlighted, we cannot understate the importance of strong leaders. So given that focus for my position and as an entire team, we decided to make the intentional shift last year to shift the framework in which we developed, coached, and evaluated school principals to the school leader paradigm. And so the school leader paradigm is a framework that was created by the School Leader Collaborative, which was a national kind of gathering of administrative associations that included the Illinois Principal Association to really dig into research about what makes highly effective school leaders to impact school improvement. And so they have now rolled out not only a framework to help coach and develop principals, but also really name the attributes and what principals should be prioritizing in their time to make sure that they are having the largest impact that they can to improve teacher practice and increase student outcomes. So you have a placemat of kind of the graphic around the school leader paradigm. And what this highlights is the shift in school leadership that Dr. Campbell talked about for an organizational leader for instructional improvement. And the language that they use is lead learners, leading learning organizations. And so if you look at the left-hand side of your placemat, what you see are the dispositions of a leader that are required to, again, impact their building at the greatest level. And so the paradigm calls those leader dispositions intelligences, and it's how they show up to the work in both the personal, social, and systems area. So for example, Principal Sweeney is going to talk about the work that she's leading this year, but really what you're going to hear is some really intentional focus on the social intelligence around capacity building of two key members of her team. And so this area has been really helpful because sometimes, right, there might be something that the leader needs to reflect on or really think about why a situation might not have landed as well as they wanted to, or they might not have been able to shift practice how they anticipated. And really looking inward to say, how did I show up to that situation and what could I have shifted, or why did it go well, and how do I continue to lean into that strength of mine to be able to increase impact? So then if we look at the middle, you'll see that infinity sign, which really highlights this intersection of the two pieces of what it takes to be an effective school leader, which is becoming, which are those intelligences, and then the doing, what they actually do in that day-to-day work. And we cannot work on those in silos because they're so interconnected, and we're not going to have the biggest impact if we don't treat them with that level of intentionality and overlap that exists. You'll also see on that infinity sign the plan, implement, assess, reflect, which you have heard Dr. Campbell talk about since she first joined D205, and that is that each leader has a cycle of inquiry where they are identifying a problem of practice in their work and really narrowing their focus to have the biggest impact. And that aligns, again, the school leader paradigm and that portion of it aligns so beautifully with how we approach the work as a district of continuous improvement in everything we do, but also as our leaders are approaching their work with that same lens. On the right-hand side of your placemat, you'll then see the doing aspect of the work, which are broken up into 3 domains: the culture domain, the systems domain, and the learning domain. And again, those are really named key priorities that a leader should be focused on to have the biggest impact in their work. What to prioritize, though, really depends on the context of their school and also their tenure as a principal. So what I want to pause here, you don't have this on your placemat, but on the screen, you'll see that we have the school leader paradigm shares how the leader's priorities may shift over the course of their time in a building. So for example, a new leader has to invest in establishing trust and relationships in their building and really establishing that culture and climate, which Dr. Martinez actually highlighted at the last board meeting during his school spotlight, right? But as they become more integrated into the community, they can then really shift their focus to really thinking about how they're evaluating systems in the building and shifting any systems to really lead to elevating student and adult learning. And so again, every leader has their own context. Every building is unique, which was what makes D205 special. And so really thinking about where the leader is in their leadership journey, but also the context of the community that they're serving. So if we go back to that right-hand side of your placemat and looking at the domains, you'll see that under each domain, there are 7 bullet points, which the school leader paradigm calls dimensions. That is 21 different focus areas, which we know if we were to ask leaders to focus on 21 things over the course of the school year, little would be done well. So what we did as a team is we identified 3 dimensions that we wanted to focus on across all principals. And so those are highlighted on the screen under culture domain, student-centeredness, under the systems domain, collaborative leadership, and under the learning domain, instruction. Then each leader collaborated with myself, and we identified an additional dimension that they were going to focus on. And that really, depends on where they are again in their journey and the school context of the community they're serving. And so each leader had 6 different dimensions that they were focused on this year. Again, and not saying that they're not doing all the different aspects, but when we're thinking about intentional and strategic work that we're pausing and reflecting on regularly and really trying to move practice, these were 3 areas that we identified and leaders really rallied behind were areas that they wanted to dig into. So I am now going to highlight what the presentations will look like. I thought I was passing it off, but I'm not. So we are excited to hear from Principal Sweeney, Principal DeCipio, and Dr. Hurt this evening around their intentional work under these 3 buckets. And so what you're going to hear is you're going to hear a little bit about their work in 2 of the different dimensions, but then each of them is really going to take some time to peel back the onion and just give you a glimpse into what their work looks like this year in one of the priority dimensions. So you'll get to hear kind of across the 3 grade bands and across each of the dimensions. They're going to end their presentations with really talking about what's next. It is continuous improvement. And so we are not done because it is 2.5 weeks left of the school year. We are constantly thinking about what's next and what the next layer of growth is, both as a principal team, but then also as individual principals. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Principal Sweeney to kick us off.
Great. Hi, guys. Good evening. I'm Lori Sweeney, the principal over at Jefferson Elementary. They're laughing at me, which feels not fair. Just wait till they go. So it's a little strange with the mic, but if you can't hear me, just let me know. So I'm excited to share some of the work that the team at Jefferson has done this year. And I'm going to spend most of my time talking about collaborative leadership, but I'm going to share just a little bit about student-centeredness and instruction to get us started. Ooh. So let's start with students, the best part of the whole thing, right? So at Jefferson, we're really fortunate to have a team of really hardworking, smart educators who are focused on giving kids what they need academically, socially, emotionally, physically, and that is no small task. It demands a really coordinated, strategic team approach. And for years, long before I got to Jefferson, we had a team of people who would come together to brainstorm when there were individual students that were struggling. And this year, we took a really meaningful step forward with that whole approach. So our student success team changed from being a group that came together just in response to a need from a teacher, and instead we meet monthly to look at some holistic data to really get a picture of how kids are performing across the school. So if you look in your artifact packet, the first one is a picture that looks sort of like mine, and this is an agenda template from one of our meetings. And what it shows is how the team is coming together to look at SEL data, things like attendance data or nurse visit data, some behavior data from like our PBIS systems, but also looking at academic data like foundations data or curriculum-based measures. And what that's allowing is it's giving the team the opportunity to take a proactive approach. So we're able to look still at an individual lens for students, but we're also able to identify some of the trends that we might be seeing across teams or across the entire school. And that's created space for us to have some really rich conversations about how we do things like allocate resources, like who does our instructional coach support? How do we use our late arrival time? And it's also allowed us to identify when students might be on the pathway to struggling, like it's not a full-on struggle yet, but we see attendance data or nurse visit data so we can intervene earlier. There's a lot to manage with the microphone and the clicker. All right. And although we've put a lot of focus, of course, on individual students, we've also put a focus this year on instruction and really being intentional about our plans for what we're doing now and what we're doing in the future. And so in the instruction bucket, my goal was to build a common instructional philosophy across the building. And to do that this year, I facilitated a collaborative process with the instructional leadership team focused on learning, planning, and reflecting together. And you can see this artifact, this vision statement roadmap is also in your packets. And this is an articulation of how we used our instructional leadership meeting time over the course of the year, and how I guided them towards creating a clear and collectively developed instructional vision. And this is really important at this time for Jefferson because our teachers are great and they made a huge number of adjustments when as a district we adopted some high quality curricular materials. But this gave us an opportunity to define what that looked like for ourselves within the district parameters, but we got to have some really rich conversations about what it meant to take ownership of our instructional identity. And so also in your packets is the instructional vision that we wrote this year. And you guys, this is hot off the presses. We just got feedback from the team last week, and the ILT met Monday to incorporate it. And we're going to be rolling out this final version to the staff at our next late arrival. But it really showcases who we are and how we want to show up for Jefferson Tigers, which is really exciting. But hold on to your pants because that was just the appetizer. We're really here to talk about collaborative leadership. I should get like an actual mic. Right, thank you, thank you. I did actually write in my notes that was just the appetizer. I plan to say that. Okay, so I am really excited to share some of the collaborative leadership work that I've led this year with our triad, and that's our assistant principal, Pia, and our instructional coach, Quinn. And just for a little bit of context, both of them were new to their roles last year. Pia had been our instructional coach, moved into the AP role. Quinn came from outside the district. And that first year, as it should have been, was all about learning the ropes and building relationships. And this year I wanted to be really intentional in how I supported their development and thought not just about them as individual leaders, but how to develop them as part of our cohesive leadership team, sort of working together to strengthen teacher practice. So I'm going to show you a few artifacts that show how I led with an asset-based mindset and a clear purpose. And you have both of these in your packet as well. But I'm going to start with the table at the bottom. So when I was thinking about how to develop them, I had this idea in mind that I wanted our triad to serve as a model for the kind of collaboration that I wanted them to be able to go out and do with the teams that they would support at Jefferson. So to that end, we started with the strengths-based mentality. And you probably all have taken a million of these behavior, like personality, Enneagram, right? We could probably go for days about that. Well, I really love StrengthsFinder. So we used that as a team and had this rich conversation about how our strengths complemented one another and where we could rely on each other. And it's something that we've used throughout our work together, and it's had such a profound impact. We're going to have our new grade level teams, if they have a new team member joining, do the same thing this year so they can kind of get a sense of the strengths people are showing up with. And then the other example I have here is just the purpose for those meetings. So we co-created what we were going to do when we spent our time together. And I mean, most of the meetings I've been in have to do with schools, and so maybe meetings everywhere, it's easy for things to get off track and for us to talk a lot and not have anything go anywhere. So having a really clear purpose is one way to make sure that whatever is decided or discussed is strategic and sort of moves outside of that space. The second priority that I focused on with our leadership triad was ensuring that we were learning together. And that felt really important, for a ton of reasons. First off, we're a school, but also because everyone has room to grow. And again, I wanted to model what it looks like and feels like when a team is committed to shared learning. And that feels like something that's especially critical in our space and where we are at with sort of our adoption of materials and what we're thinking about next. So we kicked off the year by reading The Knowledge Gap. And we picked this book because Pia brought it to the table. And it powerfully reinforces the why behind our shift in reading instruction. And with this book, we intentionally focus the conversation inward. So how did this affirm or challenge our teaching experiences? And we did that because it's really easy to show up in a professional learning environment and be like, do you know who needs to hear this? So-and-so needs to hear this. And not really think about wait, am I the one who's supposed to be hearing this? So having that as the root, we are the ones that need to hear this and experience it. And it also gave both of them, I think, some really helpful, sort of equipped them to deal with, maybe not to deal with, but to answer questions that people might have still had about the why behind some of our transitions. And it was so powerful, Quinn decided to run a book study with the staff afterwards, and she's going to do another version in the fall because some people couldn't make it happen. And then the second book that we read together was Switch, which is an oldie but a goodie, and it's focused on change management. And this time our purpose for reading was really forward-looking. So we explored how the concepts in this book applied to our current work, and we had rich discussions around some of the ideas. One of the things it talks about is if people aren't changing, it's probably not a people problem, it's a situation problem. And that's really powerful because the three of us are the leaders at the school, and we can do a lot to change the situation. We also talked about things like if change isn't happening, we might need to shrink the change. People might not be clear on what you expect to be different, or it might be too much for them to change right away. Another idea that we thought about is bright spots is something the book talks about. We are hardwired as human beings to think about what could be better, but we actually can get further faster if we think about what's already going right, and we figure out who's doing it, and we figure out why they're doing it, and we share it. And so we've used some of these ideas as we're thinking about our school improvement planning for next year. And then I'm way over time. I'm going to talk fast. The final set of artifacts that I brought to share are about how I've established clear strategic planning and shared accountability structures. Someone once told me in this work, it's really easy to let the urgent eclipse the important, and I think it is just so absolutely true. You could do all the things all day long and go home exhausted and not actually have moved the needle on strengthening teacher practice and student learning. And so we all write our school improvement plan together, and then Pia and Quinn and I all write must wins, like what do we have to accomplish this year if we're going to move the needle? And we break those down into trimester must wins. And then a step forward I took this year is in the middle of the year, I realized that we were kind of missing a piece. We translate those into weekly big rocks. And so I had them map it out over the course of a month, because if you just go to weekly planning from that stage, it can be easy to be like, I'll do it next week, I'll do it next week, and then suddenly the trimester is over. And so then that comes to this weekly place where all three of us write these big rocks. It's this idea that if you had a vase and you had to fill it with sand and big rocks, if you fill it with sand first, you can't get any of the rocks inside. But if you fill it with the big rocks first, you can still get some of the sand inside. So this really helps us be collaborative because we share this with each other. It's making sure we're aligned on our work. And then these structures obviously make it really easy to check in with Pia and Quinn and to plan for our triad meetings because there's a lot of transparency into the work that's happening. So this J picture was difficult to take, I'm just going to tell you, and thank you to Garrett. Woo! Woo! I'm really proud of the work that the team at Jefferson has done, and I'm really looking forward to next year, year 4 for me. I'm really looking forward to it. And a lot of these things that I described are like habits, and so I think part of what I need to do next year is just keep those things going strong. But there are a few things that I want to change. I want to see Pia and Quinn in action more, actually leading some of this work with the teams that they support. I think that's a great opportunity to support them and give them feedback. And also celebrate them, because if I didn't say it, and I think I didn't, they are both amazing, and it is a pleasure to get to work with them every day. And then I also think that we've done a lot, and I think we need to change our focus slightly from what have we done to what has the impact been, and how, before we do the thing, do we decide what we'll see to know if it worked. And then the last thing is just this year I made a shift where I was really intentional about planning for these meetings. Like the week before, I'd save 30 minutes and I'd look at all the agendas. And that has had an outsized impact on how helpful I think that time is for our entire team. And so, where are my notes here? So thank you for taking the time to listen to me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to lead Jefferson. It is a delight, and I also really appreciate all the leadership that you guys do. I know it can be difficult, so I really appreciate that. Do you guys have any questions?
So I want to first just give the board a couple of minutes to kind of gather their thoughts. We've shared a lot, and we just started at 5:30. As they're thinking through what they heard, this is the beauty of a committee of the whole meeting. It's where we get a more granular than we normally do in a board presentation. And in the board presentations, oftentimes we are trying our best to synthesize and roll up this work in a concise way that's digestible for our board and our community. So thank you so much for walking us through the work that you have lived for an entire year in a really short amount of time. And I know that it was hard to wrestle with what things you wanted to elevate, and there's still so much more. And I know that's going to be the case for Principal DeCipio as well as Dr. Hurt. I think what I want us to do is first just start off with our highlights. You shared a lot, and I think it would be great for the board to be able to highlight that. And so from hearing from board members what resonated with you, what deepened your own knowledge about the work, what did you hear that aligned with the district priorities. So before we get into questions, Jefferson team has done a tremendous job and some tremendous work, and we're continuing on that journey. But I want us to just highlight the work for a second before we transition into questions. Is that okay?
You want our highlights?
Yes.
You're asking me for highlights? Okay, Beth. Beth?
Just one thing that kind of resonated with me in some of the work I've done in other organizations, I've had the same experience, but just to, what I think I'm hearing you say is it's important to work smarter and not harder, and to really know what your focus is going to be. And a whole bunch of change is not always going to get you where you need to be, but to really be focused on what that change is, and then understanding why you're doing that change. And then I like that figuring out what do we want the output to be and how are we going to measure it, and know that this, initiative or change or whatever it is we're going to be doing in action is going to have the impact that we want it to have. And how will we know if it's not or it is, and if we need to then shift? So that just kind of resonated with me, and I think it's so important as a leader.
I can share. So something that stood out to me, that's one of the prompts, right? Yes. I like to sometimes follow rules. Or direction. The level, and it kind of speaks to what Beth is talking about too, the level of intentionality that you just described in a short time that you put forward in preparing for whether it's the meeting, the conversation, whether you're leading a staff piece, that intentionality and prep work is so important to kind of the rollout or the outcome. And when that work is either missing or not where exactly you want it to be, which I'd imagine, well, I'll keep that to myself, but that sometimes it could be a little bumpier, right? So I appreciate that level of intentionality. It takes thought, not just when you're in your office in the school, but at home and in your personal life. And I know it's always on your minds as you're working through, challenging and change and students and parents and all the work that you do every day. So that's one thing that I think resonated pretty deeply with me, was around the level of intentionality in the preparation. I also, if I can add one more, around a real appreciation for when you had the two books up there. You mentioned something around taking those lessons or those key themes and making them about the whole and not necessarily about me as a staff member, and how powerful that is in the thinking as a whole, or the contribution for the whole school. But ultimately what you're also doing is building culture in your building, because now we're sharing in our thinking. We've learned something new, and it might have had a profound impact on me as an educator, right? So now I'm bringing that to the building every day. And so there's a common place that I think everybody starts from that really is powerful when we're leading schools. So thank you for all of that work and intentionality. Kelly?
I'm just going to say one really quick thing. I was just in love with this sheet. I don't know if every school does this. I guess that's a question, not a comment, but sorry. But I was just going to say how much I really appreciate and love that every month that this is something that you guys, well, maybe even more often than month, but it says monthly on here, are looking at, because it's not just the instruction and the patterns you're seeing in the data, but it's really looking at the whole child and all the things that may go into why a child isn't doing well, the health office visits, the social worker check-ins. And so I just really appreciated this sheet, and I would love to hear more about this at some point. So thank you. Oh, sorry.
Anyone else? Brian?
Sure. I will say thanks for the presentation. That was great. I love that you wrote in here about participating in the Diane Sweeney Coach Professional Learning, reading The Art of Coaching, and kind of being a model for continuous growth. I think that's important for all of those teachers under you to see that you're continuing as well, your education. And I love that you put in here, build and maintain relationships by supporting new staff and staff through coaching and interactions. I think the more you principals build relationships with the staff, the more comfortable they are in coming to you. And it's not just this top-down kind of mentality, but it's more of a collaborative learning process. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, we can just, if we have a question regarding the content that was shared by Principal Sweeney.
Questions and ideas?
I just would like to hear kind of what Kelly touched on, a little bit more under your goals on the on your MTSS framework. How are you checking for, like, can you talk a little bit about how you're checking for the health of the tier level support in practice? Like what is being done there exactly, or how are you monitoring that?
Yes, so for Tier 1, we're looking at, like with the academic data at Jefferson, and I think in different ways at different buildings, teachers monitor that data. So there's like foundations data that all of the teachers are collecting. There's data associated with Eureka and all of the programs that we use. And so we have a way at Jefferson that we collect that, and so we can analyze it to figure out if there are trends across grade levels or classrooms. And so that's one way of looking at like Tier 1. If you might notice that over time, maybe one teacher's performance is higher than everyone else in their grade level, it might be like, hey, what's going on over there? Like, right? Like, what could we check out? So that's one way that we look at Tier 1. And then for attendance and health office visits, that data is fascinating. The health office visit data in particular, because some kiddos are sick, but we've noticed that some kids really use it as an escape. They like love the nurse. Nurses are the best. They're like, she makes me feel so good. So looking at that data, it actually helps us understand if kids are escaping before it has an impact on their instruction. And so then we can put interventions in place, or they might even be interventions or scaffolds that happen in Tier 1, but they might result in something like, we notice you're escaping, so we're going to pull a small group to work with a social worker for a short period of time to talk about, like what is happening behind that, what else could we use instead in our school. And I think across the district we have calming corners. Well, I don't know about high school, but we have calming corners in every classroom. You guys might need them, but we've got them. So that's like a replacement, right? If a kiddo is leaving to go to the nurse, they're missing a ton, we could figure out a way to replace that behavior with using the calming corner. So that's the kind of conversation that we can have here. And it's been fascinating. One of the biggest hurdles to this was it was just difficult to pull all of that data together, and so we've cracked the nut on that, and so that feels really exciting. And then we do look at intervention data for students receiving Tier 2 or Tier 3 supports. That happens at a different, there are 4 weeks of the month. This is one of the weeks. A different week is when we see how kids are progressing. Same
Tier
team.
2 team or tier?
Yeah, well, it's not all the same people. The interventionists join for the meetings where we talk about their data, but that's another way. And those data meetings are really important as well. I could go on and on, but I know that people need to.
Okay, yeah, I'm like, this is what I'm doing. Obviously. Thank you.
Can I just ask a follow-up? I know that you're specifically for Jefferson, but do you know, does all elementary schools follow this rubric of these meetings, the success team meetings? Yes? Yeah. Okay. And then my second question is, sorry, I have a follow-up question. That's an easy one. Is I just noticed that as much as you were discussing the health office visits and the importance of having that be part of the discussion of why they're going to the nurse and things, the nurse is not part of this meeting. Are they sometimes involved in these meetings? Or?
The nurse isn't involved in the meetings, but the nurse is the person who pulls together the data that we review for the meeting. And if there are questions, like if we don't know why a kiddo is going a lot, we follow up with the nurse afterwards. It's hard to pull the nurse for meetings because she's the only one at the school.
That's exactly.
So, yeah.
We wanna
She's in high
make sure that
demand.
our nurses are focusing on all things related to health and safety in the building, rather than in a meeting and that sort of thing. And so that's the priority area.
As you were just talking, I'm happy to hear that this is pulled through this piece, potentially at all schools. I'm also wondering, because this has such a big impact on knowing our students as educators, right? And for me, I believe that's a key, no matter how big or small the school is. The more we can know about our students, the more whether it's intervention, the more we can support their growth and development in both academics and social emotional and extracurricular and all these things, right? So happy to hear that that hopefully is spread through. But it also brings me back to this other place of just when we were talking about leadership development, right? And we see really strong outcomes from an approach like we just did with Ms. Sweeney. How do we, or do we, pull that through? Because we are a large K through 12 district, and not that everyone has to do it exactly like you are, but I'm thinking of even a principal who's been here a while, who maybe is, maybe something's changed in their school, and they could benefit from seeing different approaches. I'm thinking about new principals to the district and mentoring, and here's some ideas, like how do we fill the principal's toolkit?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I know that we oftentimes talk to the board about various aspects at various times, and sometimes it cannot always be connected. So if you recall and walk this journey back with me, my first year is when actually we brought Katie and Carrie on to the admin team. Prior to that, our principal leaders were evaluated and supported by the entire cabinet, but there was also a direct line to the superintendent. My first year when I came in, I reviewed that structure, and coming from the role of a Carrie and knowing the research, I knew that we as a district wasn't organized to support principal leaders, knowing the impact that principal leaders have. So the first step to that was really identifying and designating. If you all recall, it was in their director roles and in their executive director roles that we merged from year 1 to year 2. It was a K to 5 and a 6 to 12. Within those spaces, there were a couple of things. We looked at what structures would we be able to bring principal leaders together to share and to exchange the ideas of how we were going about the work. In addition to those collaborative structures, we also reported out actually the year before last and last year, about this intentional pairing. So we looked at the principal's work and the identifications of their areas. So for example, if there was a principal that was really honing in on culture and climate, there was an intentional pairing with another principal to kind of help support them in that work and in that way. That intentional pairing was another opportunity. We've evolved now in that, where you've heard both Carrie and Katie as well as Kevin talk about our learning walk spaces. Of then we had to say, not only are we going to create and bring principals together to talk about the work, we're going to actually now take them out of their specific context into another building to then be able to conceptualize how that leader development work is actually impacting the student experience and the learning. So that continuum of multiple structures is something we've been very thoughtful about, and that has continued. And so we actually have a structure doc that talks about the various spaces and ways in which, and as my principal leaders are smiling, they've given us great feedback on the ways in which we've come alongside them and supported them in that learning, for them not only to learn from their direct coaches and their supervisors, but also to learn from each other, to make sure that we're calibrating on our practices. We've taken a step further where they actually have to bring evidence and bring artifacts. So it's not just the lip service and talking about what I'm doing, but it's like actually showing the evidence and the impact of the work with each other and with our colleagues as another level and form of accountability.
Thanks.
You want to add something?
Dr. Campbell, I was wondering if you wanted to add about the lead principles, because that's one way where we're really embodying what Athena's talking about.
Again, with the support of the Board of Education, you all have also allowed us to elevate 2 lead principals. And so we have a EC12, EC5, and a 6 to 12 lead principal. And they are also very intentional about the learning that they are helping develop and implement, as well as codify thinking. So, for example, sharing, the lead principals is working with our HR department to really even thinking about how do we have common experiences for us attracting, retaining, and selecting teachers? How do we ensure if we know that teacher quality definitely matters to us as outlined in our strategic plan, how have we codifying the experiences and the ways that we're thinking about assessing certain values, certain strengths, and certain competencies? Prior to that work, it wasn't necessarily always aligned. So that's another way in which we're utilizing the strengths and the skill sets of our leaders in a very intentional way.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I'd take it one step further and just even also talk about, because you mentioned teachers and looking for, good matches with the district. And also I'd take it a step further and talk about how do we also cultivate that when hired and after they're hired, right? So how do we grow that from within because we can't know everything from the interview process, right, or recommendations, but how do we continue to, I'm not asking for an answer, it's a philosophical kind of view of just how do we continue to develop those characteristics and traits that we know are so important in educators. That leads to that next step of, the whole non-tenured path and all those things that come with it. And even master teachers are constantly developing. So yeah, I really appreciate that implementation and also perspective sharing with us. Anything else from the board on this one? Okay, all 50 minutes right there. Woo! Nice job, Ms. Sweeney. Hey, thank you for going first.
Okay. Hello again, I'm Jackie DeCipio. I'm the principal. Brian, welcome to our new members. It's nice to see you. I am so excited to share the journey of our work this year from Brian. As we continue to look at these 3 priority dimensions, I'm going to highlight my work this year, our work this year under our student-centeredness domain. But before that, my appetizer tonight, I'm going to give you a quick overview on the work that I'm leading through collaborative leadership and instruction. As you're reviewing your packet, as I ramble along in our journey, I'm just going to kind of talk you through how we've landed to where we're at right now. During our August school leadership team meeting, our afternoon was dedicated to an extensive data dig. We explored a variety of different data points, and while we were looking at our map, where we're looking at multiple data points, we uncovered when we were looking at our IR data that last year we had, the least amount of students in the meets category in IR for our 6th graders. So we knew that was going to be an area that we were going to focus in on for our cycle of inquiry. So this year we really focused our efforts with our current 7th graders. So you can just take a brief look at just a little snippet of this data sheet that we were looking through. With this new structure that I organized with our math instructional leadership team, we analyzed our target students' current performance. We gathered and correlated multiple data points and their progress towards these grade level standards. I led our team through a data protocol, which is another artifact, I believe, in this packet, in order to identify areas of opportunity, and we worked to move to action to improve student outcomes and teacher practice. Ultimately, that data review led us to implementing some additional Tier 2 supports for our students. And then continuing on with collaborative leadership, I'm sure that you remember my board presentation from December.
Feels like a lifetime ago when I shared updates on how I strategically leveraged my assistant principal, my core department chairs, and my instructional coaches to support our educators with the new curricular implementation. This year, I'm sure you all know that we implemented Amplify ELA, illustrative math at all grade levels, as well as our Inquire Ed for social studies at 6th. So this year, our department chairs, with the support of our instructional coaches, we led our building-based department meeting time for our staff. Our focus really has been implementing these new resources with fidelity. So this year, particularly with my math and English department chairs, we implemented an observation system where we briefly and strategically got into classrooms to informally observe instruction using the Amplify and illustrative math implementation rubric and with some slight modifications. We observe classroom instruction in order to get a better understanding of where our staff is with the implementation progress. We use this data to help us create future decisions for our own professional development. So you can see, as you're looking, this slice from some of our ELA observations earlier this year, when we were able to compare progress from November to December on maintaining high engagement through close reading strategies and Amplify performance tasks. But my main course tonight is about student-centeredness, and especially at the middle school level, I think that feeling of connectedness and student-centeredness is especially important. So that's what I'm going to dig into this evening. Again, I'm going to kind of take you back to my leadership team when we met in August. I previously mentioned that we explored a variety of data points, including our attendance data as well as our 5 essentials data. Sorry, I'm breezing through my packet. We spent a lot of time digging into our 5 essentials survey, and overall, Brian's done very well with our 5 essentials survey, earning well organized in all the categories. But when we were digging into the data and we reviewed, we noticed that our progress had kind of flatlined with our student-to-teacher trust category. So if you take a look in your packet, you can see that this indicator describes, students and teachers sharing a high level of mutual trust and respect. So looking with my team at those data points, and then through some more focused work with my assistant principal and our instructional coaches, we finalized our school improvement plan, and if you continue to kind of move over on my slides, you can see a visual representation of our school improvement plan in these boxes over to the left. So after the development of our school improvement plan, I worked with our instructional coaches on developing a goal-setting sheet for our staff. Every certified staff member creates yearly goals. You can see above how teacher goals align directly to the priority objectives, which align directly, you can see our teacher goals align directly to our school improvement goals, which align directly to the priority objectives. So you can see that we, again, focused in on that student-teacher trust. We're gonna have our E-Block teachers lean in on that. So just for some context, our exploratory block teachers, they're our PE teachers, our world language teachers, our Project Lead the Way, band, orchestra, music, industrial tech, family and consumer science and art. They focus their efforts on our learning environment goal, which is to increase that student-to-teacher trust based on that that 5 essentials data. After we meet between my assistant principal and I, Tom and I both meet with all of our teachers in our building and check in on our goals. After we meet with those teachers on their goals, later in the fall, during some of our professional development time, our exploratory teachers worked together to determine what trust looks like, what trust sounds like, and what trust feels like in each one of their individualized class settings. And they collaboratively worked to determine content-specific next steps regarding fostering trust in the classroom setting. So an example of how we notice how student trust is showing up in those exploratory block classrooms, you can see on the left a specific example from Trust in the Project Lead the Way classroom. This is something that one of our teachers developed with some student support in his class. And you can see just a snippet of a survey that our PE teachers give. Again, trying to pull out some of those traits about developing trust in the PE setting, and just getting some instant feedback for students to give to teachers and how they're feeling. The main thing that I'm super excited to highlight was the work through our Student Advisory Committee this year. Again, in this, I think it's the fourth artifact in the packet, it highlights my work with our Student Advisory Committee for all grade levels during our lunch periods for our students. During our fall student advisory meetings, we jumped right in by looking at the same 5 essentials data questions that our adults leadership team reflected on, revolving around trust from that 5 essentials. We unpacked each question and asked students how they interpreted each question. For example, when we looked at one of them, the question about my teachers always keeping their promises, our students were very honest and reported some really thoughtful and heartfelt things. They shared with us that teachers keeping their promises to them meant, like, if a teacher was unable to hand papers back, that they explained to the students, like, why or what happened. Or if teachers promised about changing seats, like, that they followed through on those promises. Those are things that were very important to our students, and that was really good feedback to hear. So after we spent the time doing the same activity that we did with our adults, we asked the students to tell us what trust looks like and what trust sounds like and what trust feels like in the classroom. So students reported to us that trust in a classroom feels like knowing that it's a safe place, that a classroom feels like a family, that teachers should have confidence in their students, and that classrooms should feel familiar and know what to expect. So that was just very meaningful and thoughtful feedback from our students. So through these conversations and the data exploration, we certainly discovered early on the connection between feeling safe in the classroom and trusting those adults around you. So based on this feedback from our student advisory team, I took that feedback to our leadership team. So then teachers reviewed that feedback that I shared with them, and we did a here's what, now what, so what protocol to help us determine some next steps on a variety of ways just to continue to build trust in our building. So it's been an ongoing journey. Again, our student advisory committee has been just a highlight to elevate that student voice, to provide feedback to all teachers, but particularly our exploratory teachers. Moving forward, again, it continues to be a journey. I look forward to collecting some end-of-year student feedback. Our students will be taking a survey towards the end of the week just to get another slice of how they're feeling, if they're feeling connected, if they have a trusted adult. We'll continue to review the 5 essentials data moving forward. We're going to continue to process and plan with our leadership team. I'm interested in some future focus groups about unpacking the student experience. I'm looking forward to some exploratory teachers participating in learning environment walks that we've done, and possibly expanding our student advisory committee. I just want to echo, I've been super reflective on this year and the changes that our new leadership has brought. And, I am kind of been a veteran here, and over the 10 years, it has been just such an amazing experience to be part of Bryan and to learn and grow with the community. I just feel very lucky and privileged to be here and continue to lead this work at the middle school level. So I know that's a lot, and it zigzagged around in our journey, but thank you.
We're clapping? Yes, we're clapping. Thank you so much, Principal DeCipio, for sharing. I echo again, it's very, for our board team to be sensitive to the fact of trying to consolidate just so much work that happens.
Sorry.
And no, you did wonderful, and I know that they appreciate you sharing and highlighting bits and pieces. My board just recently at a parent-teacher advisory committee meeting brought up, I'm connecting the dots, you like that, I'm so glad you sit next to me, brought up this idea about student voice. And Dr. Henry, you had mentioned that as well, and again, I don't want to keep telling them we doing the work. Trust me, if we didn't say it, doesn't mean that it's not getting done, but just to hear you be able to elevate and bring that out in a way that, again, adds a level of understanding to the board members around things that are very important, like supporting the whole child is something that we've been talking about that has been brought up. How do we effectively manage change, which is something, and then now we also hear about student voice and how are we bringing and elevating the student voice. So I just was talking to give them a little bit of time, but we're going to jump right into highlights and using the prompts around our highlights. Who would like to kick us off with highlights for Principal DeCipio?
Oh, sorry, were you gonna, okay. I mean, I'm really kind of just echoing what Dr. Campbell said. I appreciate how you use the 5 essentials data and like found something that, one of the descriptors that maybe you weren't, I mean, it wasn't even one that you weren't doing well, and it was just like flatlined, like you said. And using that to, you know, focus on the importance of that and digging in to see what you can do and how you can, you know, establish more student-teacher trust. I also love the Student Advisory Committee as a middle school counselor and parent and board member. You know, student voice is so important, and you know, hearing that student perspective and then using that feedback to go back with teachers and discuss how you can build that trust and next steps in that process. So I just really appreciate that work, and thanks for talking about it.
Thank you.
Sorry, Beth. So just to build on that, the student voice piece, like we hear it a lot, but it was really nice to hear like specifically, like how you're getting that feedback. And I think sometimes we have tools and, you know, they work, but are they enough? And so 5 essentials is one thing. I love the idea of the student advisory because kids are super, super honest and they will always tell you, and they're almost yes, brutally honest. Yes, yes. But I think also another piece of that you brought up was, well, first of all, in the student advisory meetings, I think you can just have those like really honest conversations that you can't get that kind of detail and information out of a 5 essentials survey. 5 essentials is great, but you know, just to have those like raw conversations and kind of dig in, maybe it sounds like this, but maybe what they really are getting at is something else. So I think that's just so important. And then to have the students say what trust looks like to them, and that the teachers have confidence in them, and I think like that their expectations of them are high. And I think that valuing that student voice, like to ask students for feedback, but then not act on it or do anything about it, also doesn't feel very good, or there's not a lot of trust in that. So I think really listening and valuing their voice is so important in that trust piece too. And that just stood out to me because I'm sure that the students that, you know, when they are talking to you and your team, and then you guys are implementing something like end of the year surveys and getting more feedback from more students, that probably feels really good to them, like you valued their input and then acted on it. So thank you for doing that work.
Thank you.
Important.
Kelly?
I'm literally going to say the same thing as them, so I won't repeat everything because I think that it's all, yes, it's amazing. And I would say just creating the student advisory committee alone probably improves your 5 essentials data, honestly, because I think the kids want to feel valued and respected, and I would imagine that even just creating that committee is probably going to move some of this. And I just wanted to comment on your comment about how when you ask them more specifically what keeping their promises, and it was something silly like changing seats, right? And how much that means to kids. And it's just like the little tiny things. Because when you look at this and you see 20% say that their teachers don't keep their promises, you're like, oh my gosh. But then you hear what maybe the reason is, and you're like, oh, okay. It's just like such a simple thing that can easily be fixed if the teachers knew that that's what they were writing that about, you know? So like just hearing exactly from the kids what it is that means teachers keep their promises, and saying, hey, if you tell your students they're going to switch seats, like maybe make sure that they switch seats. I mean, it's pretty simple. Anyway, I love that comment, so thank you.
Yeah, they were cute. Thank you.
Nikki?
All right. I feel like I'm saying a lot of the same thing, but I think in short, I loved your multi-pronged engagement and feedback approach, you know, getting information from the teachers, the students. I also loved that your approach uses it's goal-oriented, but it uses both qualitative and quantitative feedback and data. So I just think it's really well-rounded, and appreciate you also engaging the students. I think that's really meaningful.
Thank you.
I'm going to go one step deeper, and so.
I'm ready
something
for it.
A little new, really around, well, I go back to, again, we sit on a board, we don't really get in, know how that plays out in a school, but that common thread of we all value the importance of student voice and how that is being gathered across the board at all three middle schools and the importance of that. It doesn't have to be similar, but I think the most important part of what you shared with us is how your staff or you are modeling how we handle differing perspectives in a really collaborative and effective way that impacts change. And it's so powerful for our students to have a voice in that. There's often times where, they're kids, and I'm a mom, and I tell my kids what to do a lot, but behind the why and understanding and even showing the care that you care, adds so much clarity in Springboard. So, at times, even as adults, our intentions are really good, but the outcome maybe was perceived differently by whoever is receiving what we're doing. And so those are the moments where we could take a break and say, hang on, time out, help us understand, and then move forward together. And again, going back to improving school culture, safety, and how we build those things to maximize student learning, because we know that they influence them, that those items influence their ability to reach their learning potential. So thank you for providing that. Anything else from the board on this one?
Just that, I think you're right, when students have some ownership and have a part in those decisions that are being made, and even if they can't be a part of the decision because it's something that aligns with student safety or another issue that just has to be done, when they understand why that has to be done and why the changes are put in place and how it's going to impact them ahead of time, I think that they just have more buy-in to that, and they're more likely to do those things with, without complaining too much, or, and understanding it, and it becomes a part of their day a little bit more easily than when they're just told, as we've learned as parents, right? So.
I don't know that we have any questions or ideas, but I think we kind of covered it. But if I didn't, I'm just looking around. We're good? Yeah, Nikki?
Just one question. I know you said with the Student Advisory Board, you were looking for a diverse group of participants. How did that go? I mean, how many students did you have involved? Were you able to get a diverse group of participants, or did you find any opportunities in that process?
It fluctuated, for the first year. I have not done this in many years, so it was the first year coming back to doing this. So I just did a screencastify and I shared it with all students in the building, and then students completed a form, and then I'd email them and communicate with them when we were going to meet. So it kind of fluctuated depending on the day and the grade level. Again, I think I'd like to get more students involved and be a little bit more strategic on some focus groups to make sure I'm hearing from all voices from all corners. So for year one, I feel like we got it started, but I definitely think there's lots of opportunities to grow, and just to make sure that I'm hearing from a variety of students and to see a full spread of the student experience. So I think those are some next steps for us to consider as we move forward. So we had a little bit fewer 8th graders, a little bit more 6th and 7th that were interested. But I talked with them this week about even taking the kids that have come and kind of making them more leaders and maybe having them take more of an active role in student advisory for next year and, continue to grow and build moving forward. So
That's great. That's helpful. Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
Can I ask real quick? Are you going to monitor this growth of trust throughout the year, or, because I know 5 Essentials is later in the year, and it's just.
Yeah, so we have an end of the year survey that we'll give to our students, because I don't want to wait for 5 Essentials because it takes forever to get that back. So we've had a couple different other checkpoints with students. You have a trusted adult. We asked at the beginning of the year right away to make sure everyone has an adult that they can go to in the building. That's something we do right away when the school year starts. And so this is just, I would say this is another, formative assessment before we get to the summative of the 5 essentials. So we'll be able to check in and see where students are at and get just a snapshot of data now. And then, of course, we'll continue to look when that 5 essentials data is released. No, thank you.
Quick thing, sorry, I'm talking a lot tonight. I I just think this is another opportunity to share across schools ways that are working for different leaders to get student feedback. And I think I just remember one of our past middle school leaders who, during March Madness, met with kids during lunch, and then they had they had stats, and they, weren't gambling, of course, but they were just, coming up with, who was going to win. Stats, right.
Glad you clarified that.
Yes, of course. Was not happening, no. But just like meeting them where they're at, you said, and being with them during that time, talking about something they love and are super into. And then just during that time, she would have conversations casually with them and be able to get a lot of information from them and feedback. So I think just when leaders can share things that are working well for them at the different levels, because it looks different for different levels, it's just another great opportunity to do that.
Thank you. So definitely not last but not least, we are super excited for Dr. Hurt to round us out and bring us home in sharing her work this year.
Thank you so much, Dr. Campbell, and thank you to the board for allowing us this time to share all the amazing things we're doing. I have a confession. As a social studies teacher, brevity is not my strong suit, but I am going to just stick to the script. So I get too excited. I would love it too much. All right, so I'm going to touch on all 3, student-centeredness, collaborative leadership, but I'll really spend the bulk of the presentation on instructional leadership that I have shown this year in our work that we have done at York. So I just want to highlight student-centeredness at York. So after reviewing data, including our chronic absenteeism, our 5 essentials data, and information that I gleaned in the May before I started, it became really, really clear that we needed to prioritize creating a school where all students felt like they belonged and where staff wanted to be every day. And most importantly, what a Duke means. And so we know that when students feel connected to their school, they come to school. But more importantly, we know that connection and belonging are huge drivers for student academic achievement. And so this second semester, we actually have a student group that we started last year, which is our York Climate and Culture Committee. And that student group was really excited about creating a full-scale Tier 1 celebration of what it means to be a Duke, and so with our We Are Dukes campaign. So we use that framework to provide opportunities for students this semester to be celebrated for athletic, academic, and also behavioral achievements. It culminated in our official first Duke Olympics that we held at the end of April, which is a really special event. Throughout the whole week, students were able to compete in different games and activities. You can see those pictures, whether it's cornhole or those Minute to Win It games, which kids loved. It was spectacular. Pie eating contests, man, they were teenagers and they were very excited. And so then on Friday, we had an assembly, and so we engaged in this class competition. So students earned points over the course of the week for participating in events during lunch, but also outside activities. And then we also had attendance factor in to the class competition. So we harnessed some, good old-fashioned competition to be able to really celebrate the positive things that students are doing at York. So the assembly was great. We got lots of really positive feedback, and most importantly, that work of the York Climate and Culture Committee was really realized. And our students, just like how you all were just talking about the amazing work that's happening in both of these buildings, it was great for students to take ownership. They ran the assembly, they were really excited, and it just makes you smile, right? Because you're like, oh my gosh, you get to see this, come to fruition. So that's been very, very positive. And we look forward to more opportunities to provide those opportunities for students to connect with their peers and York. I do want to touch on collaborative leadership. Another opportunity that I identified as the leader of York is to increase the impact of our instructional coaches. After meeting with the team late last year and kind of getting my sea legs around what instructional coaching looked like, we wanted to really think about a shift that's going to impact instruction and student outcomes a lot quicker than what was happening previously. And so we read a book together. So I have it up there, Student-Centered Coaching, Leading Student-Centered Coaching by Diane Sweeney. And it was really impactful for our team. Our instructional coaches are amazing humans. And they want to be in classrooms. They want to be doing everything and help teachers to improve those student outcomes. And we just needed a different structure. So our coaches work directly with instructional teams to identify problems of practice. So things that it's a collaborative. It's not just like a top-down, this is what I want you to work on. It's, what are those barriers to really reaching that next echelon when it comes to student outcomes? And so then the coaches facilitate a reflection. They do observations of the teachers in their classrooms, and then they're able to analyze that data and identify next steps. I put two different examples of what our teams did. I'll highlight the one in social studies. There was a social studies team that teaches a senior elective, and the teachers were really grappling with students being able to access complex text that were based on industry readings, right? The course is a psychology class, so a lot of primary sources in the field of psychology. And so they saw that students were really struggling with this more scientific reading within the social sciences. And so that coach was able to co-plan with the teachers, observe the practices in action. The coach went multiple times into the psychology sections, and then follow up with a student work analysis to see that impact. And so we've seen these teams leveraging that support continuously and identifying those next steps for areas of growth. And I'm really excited about the work that's being done because it is allowing our instructional coaches, which we are so privileged to have in this district, to really leverage research and high-yield instructional practices, helping those teachers to have access to those, evaluating how it's working, reflect, which is only raising everything that we're doing in our classrooms. All right, now get to some really fun stuff. I'm really excited. We had the opportunity to obviously, we're so lucky again, to have late starts, late arrivals every Wednesday. And so something that last year kind of just stuck in my craw a little bit and I wanted to know more about was what was happening on these instructional teams during late arrivals. It's such an amazing resource, and I want to make sure that we are using every single minute to make sure that we have positive and increased outcomes for our students. And so what I did is engage in a cycle, as you can see by this circle, and taking a look to know that, okay, what's happening in those PLCs, and because we know that consistent high-quality instruction coupled with high-quality materials is going to lead to student growth. And so I started to walk our PLCs on Wednesday and take an inventory of what was happening during those times. Obviously, York is a big place. We have, close to 300 certified staff members, dozens upon dozens of instructional teams, but I just started taking an inventory to look for patterns over time. And so we identified that some of those teams were spending time doing a lot of planning, which is essential to teaching, right? You have to plan. You don't just come in and wing it, right? Teams need to talk, but is that getting in the way of other work that we could be doing? And so knowing this, we wanted to provide support to teachers through our division chairs. And so I was really excited about this. I'm just a huge nerd. And so I wanted to really harness that collaborative leadership model. So I facilitated leader learning around how we can improve instructional outcomes by improving what's happening during our late arrival time. And so what that looked like is that leader learning together. And so we engaged in excerpts from a text that is called Leading Impact Teams, and it's all around collective efficacy. And so that feeling, right, everyone being on the boat, rowing in the same way, right, that universal feeling that we can exact change if we are working together. And so I love this book because it really talked about how to actually carry this out. It's kind of like that new, sometimes people talk about PLC plus. This is kind of that next move. The old concept of PLC sometimes can get a little stale. What's that next step for taking a look at student work protocols? So then division chairs asked them to prioritize a PLC to support this semester. And so they pushed into those PLCs and they facilitated leader reflection on that process. They worked with the PLCs. They took a look at student data. They used student work protocols. And then they were able to engage in that process on various levels, depending on where the instructional teams were at. But all of our division chairs agreed that this work is necessary. And actually, we heard so much positive from instructional teams because they were excited about this idea of how do we incorporate this student data in a more intentional way. And so to measure that impact, I had the great opportunity to walk classrooms side by side with those division chairs after I had observed, their facilitation in PLCs. And then we reflected together about what those next steps are. As a building leadership team, we will be spending our first summer days really drilling down, taking all of that data to create a well-codified structure for next year's PLCs focused on student work and instructional improvement. All right, math, here we go. So we are obviously engaging in a cycle of improvement when it comes to math, and in your packet, you can see, I know that you guys have seen this a bunch, but I just want to draw your attention to it. There's the York High School Support Plan, and it highlights the intentional work that's being done at York in math, English, and social studies, and some other areas too. But those are certainly the main foci. So on page 2 of that York High School Support Plan, it highlights the math supports and what that has looked like this year. We know that professional learning has accompanied the first year of our full illustrative math implementation. And so professional learning took place through a myriad of ways. A couple of those that we highlighted, we had our teacher learning communities, or TLCs, as we like to call them, tender loving care. That's what I always say every time. It's math, it just wraps you in a nice hug. Our Institute Day learning, and then something to me was probably the most impactful are those guided observations for our leaders. And you've heard that term before, and is something that was happening and was really, really impactful at York. So in those packets, you'll also find the tool that we used for those guided observations. And so this isolates the look-fors that we defined as a district that we are prioritizing in our math classrooms. And so big picture, all this learning has allowed for York's instructional leadership team to deepen that knowledge of our standards and instructional shifts that are happening in our math classes. This learning also gave multiple opportunities for our staff to learn together with support of district administration, and I've been really appreciative of that as a building principal. There's only one of me, and it's just a lot of humans, and so it's just been so nice to have the support of our district administration. Our next steps are obviously to be responsive to feedback from our teachers, from students, and families as we ensure continuously improving the classroom experience while holding those high expectations that we certainly demand here in Elmhurst. All right, our cycle of improvement with English and social studies. Like I said, I'm a social studies teacher by trade. I'm married to a social studies teacher. Humanities is where my heart is. And Katie Lyons has humored me and allowed me to be part of, there we go, of every single step of what I'm about to talk about. So I can talk about it as a learner, also as a leader. And so I personally have been just so impressed by the work this district has done in K through 8 and the growth that we've seen in student outcomes, and especially in those summative assessment data. And so to me, it really, highlighted the urgency around York and the work that we can do to match the absolute success that we are seeing in K through 8. And so we knew that we wanted to review texts and tasks that students are engaging in English and social studies. And so certainly taking a look and where we land our priorities, we decided, because the scale obviously is huge, right? There are so many social studies classes, so many English classes. And so we prioritized grade 9 and 10 English and grade 9 in social studies. And so there's a copy in your packet that is a presentation that I believe, Katie, you did, right, in January? And so it outlines the greater depth. I'm just going to give you that flyover of the view from the building principal perspective. But Katie obviously presented this in depth in January. And so just like division chair learning around increasing the impact of PLCs, we began with leader learning for division chairs and instructional coaches around text and task complexity. I'm just going to combine those into one. I'm going to make it work. It'll be a new educational word. And this included using something that I think a lot of people on our team had not used, which is IMET. That's the Instructional Materials Evaluation Toolkit, obviously IMET for short. We also included a copy of that in your packet. It's long, but it's definitely worth seeing because there's some really impactful things around what are those non-negotiables. When you're evaluating text and you're taking a look at tasks and how are these things lining up to really support and to meet those high level of standards, you need to use a tool like this, right? Because sometimes, and I'll just talk about social studies teachers, we love a good passion project, right? So like I love teaching about apartheid in South Africa. Steve Biko, like man, I could talk for like 16 days about it. And my freshmen, other people are like, I think we gotta trim this down. I'm like, no, we can't trim it down. I love it. We have to keep on teaching it. You can get out of whack, right? And you can have teachers that are going in all these different directions. And so anchoring the your text and what you're asking students to do is obviously essential in a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And using a tool like IMET really helped our team to calibrate our understanding of what constitutes rigorous work and that text complexity. And Katie did an absolutely fabulous job with our team to really talk about some other things that's in the secondary world when it comes to literacy and what's that fun rope? Yes, exactly. Yes, I know, exactly. The rope. Exactly. So as someone who, and again, my husband has a degree in reading, but it's not always something that a secondary teacher knows, right? Even our English teachers, right? Because usually that's focused on younger grade levels. And so it was really impactful for our team to engage in that work. And so I participate in each of these sessions because it is just so important to me, and I love it. It fills my cup. But it is just really great because I feel like we're on this precipice of just really putting all of this together to increase those outcomes for our students. The learning series also allowed for this group of leaders to analyze those grade 9 and 10 core texts and tasks for English, and then grade 9 in social studies, and reflect on those next steps. And I'm very excited. We unveiled this, but we're eager to bring this learning to our course teams, because obviously this was just the leader learning, right? The most important people in the room, right, are the teachers. So we wanted to make sure that our capacity was really high to be able to support this work, because our teachers are the boots on the ground. They are the individuals who are going to be facilitating this for our students. And so, as a nod to collaborative leadership, we have crafted a summer learning series for our educators to engage in. They'll be going through a similar process that we did as leaders. So that way, again, feeling that confidence in how you're evaluating these secondary resources to really ensure that our students are getting the best experience and they have the tools to be successful in their post-secondary lives. So I could talk about this forever, but I'm going to keep it there. And again, I just wanted to say thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to share all the amazing things. There's tons more stuff. So part 2, there'll be like a mixtape that I can send. But there's lots of stuff happening at York, and I'm just so honored and privileged to be able to lead such an amazing team of humans at York and be in a space with our great students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hurt. As I give the board a little bit of time to kind of get their thoughts together, one of the things that I want to call out is that when this particular administration team, and one of the things that the board really impressed upon us as we were entering in the strategic planning process was that we are a unit district. We have an early childhood and have 8 elementary, 3 middle schools, and 1 high school. And so what creates the uniqueness of a unit district is that actual journey and the pathway. And so it was really, really amazing to hear you talk about and connect the work that's happening at the high school to the work that is already taking place at the K-8 space. And so I want to call that out. What I also want to call out is this idea about this work being done alongside and very intentionally supported by district office. One of the things that the board, personally shared with me upon my arrival into this district is this idea or perception that York is a separate island, and there's a disconnect between what happens at York and what's happening in other spaces across our district. Yeah. So thank you for highlighting the fact that York is very much a part of our district, and that you as a leader is coming alongside, and the awareness of that, as well as creating space for us to work collaboratively with the critical leaders of change. And at a high school, it is driven by our division chairs. And so to hear, when we go back to that triangle, you hit on the work from the instructional leadership, the professional learning communities, as well as starting off the work that's being done with your instructional coaches. And so at this time, I'm going to open it up for highlights to be shared regarding of what you heard from Dr. Hurd.
Beth. You like to go first today,
I
Beth.
guess so. I don't know. I'm wide awake tonight. I think talking about York High School, and you were talking about how many students are there and how many teachers are there and how many people you're managing. And so I appreciate the organization of finding a way to tap into support for different groups across that huge organization and be able to support teachers in different areas and bring in the division chairs or our leaders at district office, or however however it works to help manage and support that, but that you're intentionally doing the work to help support all those areas across the school.
Thank you.
Kelly?
No. No highlights.
Lots of intentional work. Brian?
That's what I was kind of going to say here. Thank you so much for the presentation. I do like that you talked about late starts and having them be a lot more purposeful than just planning, but that teachers work collaboratively and how important professional development is and collaboration is to target students on a continuous basis. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
We can blend in the questions and ideas. It's fine. We've already broken
Just
a lot
go
of
for
rules
it.
tonight.
I also like the Olympics. That was kind of cool and fun.
It was awesome. It was a great week. Super pumped. And we'll do it every year, not every 4 years. Kids asked. They're like, is this only happening every 4 years? I'm like, no. Every year, friends. Every year.
Well, I was going to say, I love the idea of like the PBIS and school-wide celebrations, like the Duke Olympics. I think that's great for, like you said, connecting the students and just having them feel involved. But I do, like, for the kids who are kind of outside of that, or that maybe they're displaying behaviors that aren't what we want to see, or aren't into Duke Olympics and things like that. I mean, I know it's a very complex answer, but in question, but can you maybe talk about high level, like some of the supports and interventions that
Sure.
are for those kids who are just kind of like outside of that world? You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
so something that actually came out of our student group, because that group is very, very diverse and intentionally cross-cutting, and it's a very large group, was around how do we create an event that's not just for the kids who do everything. And so just like on the part that was cool about doing it during lunch, and if you take a look, and I have so many pictures from it, you truly see students who I didn't know that kids were so excited about bags. Like, I was like, why don't we have these here year round? Like, I'll just buy them. I'll just pay them out of pocket. This would be great. Or like ping pong. Kids were lining up to play ping pong. And I think that was really cool because the students were like, we want to make sure that we have opportunities for students to engage in this. And so I received feedback. An amazing student came to me, and I will not name them, but they are absolutely great student the week after. And they were like, Dr. Hurt, I participated in one of the events during the assembly, but is there any way that instead of just having everybody staring at everybody, that we could have these small little things? I'm like, that is great. So I started thinking about, okay, who is not, like, what data can we take on those students who don't, still feel that connection. Because you're exactly right. You could have this whole thing and it's the same kids who participate in all this stuff. So our student services team, a huge focus for them is really around belonging. And so we, a little preview, staff doesn't even know this, so it's not being live streamed or anything. But we, can... Yes. So just that, really getting our data around connectedness, and something that I had success with in my previous life was really, it's called the Harvard Dot Project. And you do it for students, you do it for staff. And so how you're actually mapping those connections of those students who seemingly seem like they are not connected, actually taking that data and, having a conversation with them and meeting with them. And so I'm really excited to roll that out in fall. Probably October Institute Day, we'll have staff go through and literally go student by student. And the question that you ask yourself as an adult is, if this student was in distress with something that was not related to my course content, would they come to me? And it's really eye-opening. And then we will meet with every single student because it gives you really, because some kids will not get a dot, right? They will not get a little X in the spreadsheet. And then are those students connected to something? Maybe they play traveling sports outside of York, right? Or maybe they don't have a connection. And so then we say, here's the 70 activities, right? And so student services does a really good job. And when we're talking about frequency of heading down to student services, the nurse, so that data is being kept, but I love triangulating data to make sure that we are not missing students. Because in a building of 2,600 students, we don't ever want to miss anybody.
Can I, you go ahead, sorry.
I think there's probably, opportunities, and I'm sure, obviously, you know this, and, your student services team know this, but like, I feel like then in those cases, when you get the students with the red dot or whatever, to connect them with, another peer or with a adult in the building or, SAG groups and things like that. So I think, obviously, using that data to connect
For
with
sure.
some of those.
Yeah, we ran a little pilot this year. We took a look at data last year about our students who are transferring into District 205. We know all of the research behind, right, those students, no matter what their academic prowess is, that just moving schools is so impactful. And so we ran a pilot this year to match transfer students who opted into a program with a trusted adult. And so those students meet weekly with those adults. And so I would love to be able to scale that up and see how we could, because you're exactly right. It's making that connection and not just, on that surface level, but how do you get to the essence of who that student is? So then we feel so excited to come to York and to be a Duke. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add the work that is being done at York High School is really balanced on that student engagement piece. And one of the things that we know to be true, just reflecting on our student attendance data, is that students tend to be in higher attendance rates during those Duke Olympic weeks, during homecoming weeks, places where they feel super connected to the school, and on top of that, adding rigor and high classroom engagement in each of those places is really something that the York team has done a really great job this year of making sure that every student has an impactful experience all there. But so, like, we see the fruits of their labor in the Duke Olympics, but behind that is really a focus on making sure that all students are included and coming to school and engaging in a strong classroom environment.
Yes, go ahead. Yes, sorry.
I just was going to build on that a little bit, like finding ways to, how can we find ways to get all of those students involved? And sometimes, as we know, even with our older kids, we have, they have at college a multitude of options, and, you know, it's the taking that first step.
Yeah.
And finding somebody to go with, or doing something for the first time. And I know at one of my kids' schools as freshmen, they had a small group of peers that kind of had a checklist. They all had to go to a sporting event. They all had to go to in town and get coffee. They all had to do a few things that were kind of York related and that your kids do, but just going to the math lab, to the, you know, doing those things for a first time with somebody, with support, and kind of having to do it. You know, then the next time it's a little bit easier. And so I love the idea of finding ways to bring all of the kids in. Sometimes we see a lot of the same kids doing things, but pulling them in as well is important. So thank you for that.
Just kind of just made me think of this. I just wanted to say I appreciate and really like, I don't know what it's called exactly, but my daughter's freshman there. And I love that you, at lunch, I don't know, what's it called?
FOG.
Yeah, FOG.
Yeah,
That's
freshman
it.
orientation
I love
and
that. I think
guidance.
that's such a great idea for like incoming freshmen who don't really know what they're doing and have, you know, you want to try something or learn about something, but you don't know what it is. I just think that's so smart. So I just want to say that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else? No, all right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I will turn it over. Is that you, Dr. Campbell? Sorry. Yes, it is. I'm not reading signals right now. Thank you.
It's okay. Yes, it is. I want us just to give another round of applause to these three leaders. Since being here under this administration, this is the first time that we have actually asked our leaders to come in and talk so specifically about the work, and for these three brave souls to do that and to kind of be the first of this model. We discussed this last year as a cabinet team, that we keep talking about what's happening in schools, but I think we knew that our board and our community and how we were evolving in the work, that it was also a great pulse check for the board to hear that we're not just making this stuff up, and that it actually is living and taking, not to say that you thought we did, but I mean, you know, we could make it sound really good, right? But know that the work is actually taking place and happening. And just to underscore, we are still on a journey of continuous improvement. We are, and within all of our schools, there's work that we need to continue to do. And I know that oftentimes in serving a very diverse community that has various perspectives and experiences, one of the things that I'm working really hard is that the individual experience doesn't create a false idea about the whole experience for other students. We are working very closely and hard to try to differentiate the support. And so if a student, if a family is not experiencing and having a positive experience, how do we come alongside? But that does not take away from the hard work that these leaders and our school teams are doing. So once again, thank you so very much for sharing that. I also want to thank the cabinet team. They mentioned it, but I know for a fact that the work that is happening at the school level could not have happened without the concerted, coordinated, intentional efforts of our cabinet team. When the board hired me, you hired me, and one of the charges you gave me was to really look at the development of leaders. You hired me and told me that it was important that we elevated the work and the professional support of our leaders, and I am very happy to say from district to school level, from school level to district, with those that are even sitting in the audience coming in, the expectation has been set, but we don't set that expectation high without coming alongside and providing them with the necessary support, the tools, the resources, and the feedback for us to continue to be on this journey. And I appreciate the Board of Education also doing that for me as your superintendent. Fresh off the press, as we shared, each year we identify what our district-wide priority objectives will be. We have been really pleased that for the last 2 years, we've gotten earlier and earlier in that. We work with what we call the strategic planning admin team. I know they don't like this. Okay, they're telling me don't say it. Okay, so we work with the strategic planning admin team that is also not only the cabinet, but there's representation from our district directors across all departments as well as our schools. And what they do is they actually are the team that really looks at those particular objectives that were set for this year and any evidence that we have that we met the projections, met the benchmarks, and that we're moving in the way and having the outcomes that we want to have with our work. We also know that this is a multi-year process, so that strategic planning admin team thinks very thoughtfully about how we're building off of the work and continuing the work. And so we presented and shared with our district leadership teams in the month of April, our priorities for next year. Our strategic planning admin team has already met and calibrated around those priorities, identify what outcomes we expect and what critical work we want to do into next year. Why is that so important? Because our teams, as you've heard from all 3 of our leaders tonight, have already started planning for next year. So when we talk about the alignment, they're not planning just because of what they have seen, but they're also intentionally planning in alignment with what we've identified as the district-wide priorities. Department teams are aligning their work, and it's already done. Teaching and learning, the work that's being done on the student services across the board has already begun to think about how we're going to come alongside our wonderful team in doing this work. Again, thank you. I know that we got into the weeds, but that's the purpose of this space, is to kind of get into the weeds. I appreciate the thoughtful reflections. I appreciate the feedback. But more importantly, I appreciate the opportunity as superintendent to continue to lead this work with a highly dedicated and skilled leadership team. With that, I turn it back over to my board president.
I wasn't ready. Hang on. Now I am. Thank you. Okay, moving on our agenda, we have board communications. Does anybody have anything to share? I don't think so, right? On board communications? No. Okay. Upcoming meetings, May 28th, 2025, we have a Board of Education meeting at 7 p.m. And on June 4th, 2025, we have a policy committee meeting at 5:30 p.m. Both meetings will take place here at district office. And with that, it is 7:20 and this meeting is adjourned.